Es, thank you so much for joining us today, and I really appreciate you taking part in our Pathway to Success video series. And I suppose to kick things off, it would be great if you could kind of give us a quick intro to yourself and your current role.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Es Jones. I am Head of Compliance, Conduct and Financial Crime for NatWest Markets. That is a global role. So I think you'll all be very familiar with compliance. So that includes surveillance, advisory compliance and the control room as well. The financial crime function is pretty straightforward as well, what you would expect to see in a global investment bank. And then the third aspect is conduct. Which when I was interviewing, I was quite interested to understand what that head of conduct role meant. In reality, it's as far and wide as you can probably imagine, and it touches on all different areas of conduct. So I do get involved in, conduct challenges, member of the conduct committee. So we look at culture and conduct and how that then positively impacts the bank as well. So my role is split into compliance, conduct and fin crime, and responsibilities for several teams globally.
2020 been for you, both kind of personally, professionally, from a regulatory perspective?
So for me personally, it means I have really been able to be a parent because I've been at home so much more. I've been working from home since the end of March. I think I'm going to be working from home going into the new year. So I have been able to be a lot more hands-on as a parent, but actually the hours that I've worked have been longer as well because we've taken out 3 hours of a day of a commute. On a work perspective, I realised that a lot of the stresses that comes with my role was probably down to having to rush out of the house very early in the morning, drive to the train station to catch a certain train, to then catch the tube. And actually my stress levels are probably heightened at 8:30 when I get into the office, versus now I can sit down with a cup of coffee as soon as the children are on the school bus at 8:10, and I'm actually pretty stress-free. I also feel much more connected to my global teams because actually for the first time, everybody does everything via Zoom, and actually you can see individuals on the screen, whereas when we were having global team calls with my management team, people who weren't in my office with me physically would just be at the other end of the phone. So we've had some really good feedback from the regions saying that they feel very much on an even footing with the UK teams because everybody's been on Zoom calls. This year has shown is that you can do your role successfully permanently from home. I'm not saying that's the right model, but I think even coming into 2020, where we'd like to think flexible working is less of a taboo, I think some of those cynics who've had to do it themselves a month on end realise that you can be super dedicated and productive and still work remotely.
What do you think has been the biggest regulatory challenge over the last 12 months or so? Well, particularly 2020 from a COVID perspective. Is there anything in particular that's come to light, or has it just been a continuation of the usual pressures?
I think it's been a continuation of the usual pressures, but it's been highly augmented. If you think about what we had to do and mobilise, as a NatWest group, 50,000 people to work from home in very little time, you'd never think that was actually physically possible. So we've had to do an awful lot of work on, what means of communication our regulated users have to do. There's been an awful lot of communication that's gone out. We've done an awful lot of training. So there's been a lot of hand-holding to make sure that those, decisions and setups, are successful. I think as we all hit the summer and the dawn of realisation was that we weren't really going back to the office, we've moved from a tactical working from home model to now we need to look at it strategically, because people will be out of the office potentially more than they will be in the office. So we've got to make this set up for success in order for it to be a model that can work depending on, what the setup will be. I think there will be some degree of regulatory forbearance for decisions that are made at the outset of lockdown, as it were, in the UK and other countries. But I think the regulator will be really scrutinising institutions on how their control model has evolved as time has gone on, and we realise that actually, remote working is becoming very much the new norm. Sure. So, I think it's just been the same focus. But I think in a few years, we will see the regulators looking into how banks have reacted. I don't think that will happen in 2021. I think, we'll see issues potentially come out from the markets in 2022, when potentially decisions that have been made have now come to fruition, and we've obviously got to look at how the economy will be. Sure. But I think being a UK bank, we're in close contact with our regulator. I think the relationship has strengthened from my perspective, because you're in dialogue with them on so many different topics quite regularly.
And obviously you've got a global team, and you're kind of global leader within financial crime and compliance and conduct. I mean, have you any kind of insight into some of the challenges running different global teams and the different kind of cultural challenges that might produce because of COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got teams in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, in the States, Amsterdam. We've got a number of Western European offices as well. And as we saw the pandemic grow in severity, we've realised that different countries have reacted very, very differently. You see a big impact on well-being come out quite quickly, because different countries are at different stages of dealing with that pandemic as well. And we've also seen it, vary from country to country, where people physically can't, go home. So we've got a lot of sort of what we would call expats out in Singapore and Hong Kong, and the flights just aren't international, so they're unable to come home, to see their family in the UK. So yeah, managing a global team has been really challenging, because people have reacted differently, and have been under different restrictions depending on where you've lived.
And again, on that kind of global theme, I mean, are there things that you'll take forward into next year and subsequent years that you particularly learned during this period that you found useful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this year I've reached out to not just obviously my management team, who I meet with regularly, but different grades. So everybody from your MD level down to your analysts, just to say hi and ask how people are. I think we are in a habit of saying, hey, how you doing? I'm fine, thank you. You move on. Really probing, are you really okay? How's your home set up? And actually trying to really understand, whether someone is okay. And also, making sure that this is a safe place. And if they aren't coping or they want to raise something, that they can raise. As a leader, it's really important to show tone from the top, and show that, there are days that I've struggled, and, that it has been, a very positive year for me. There have been days which have been phenomenally difficult for a variety of reasons. And I've shared that with people, that there are days it's okay not to be okay. And that doesn't mean, that you're less of a person and less of a leader, and the corporate grade just doesn't matter. So I think showing a little bit more of the challenges that you're facing, I think makes people, appreciate that it's okay to share that information.
Is there anything in particular you'd like to share with people in terms of, progressing and getting up to that kind of MD level?
Try and summarize it maybe into 3 key points.
Perfect.
I would say you need to have very thick skin, and you really need to make sure that you realize that you can't control how other people react. So you're having difficult conversations, and providing you're always giving that message in a professional and emotive way. If someone doesn't like that message, you can't control how people react. So having that thick skin and realizing that you're doing the right thing, but someone else might not realize that, I think is key. I think you need to be very careful of how you balance your home life and your work life. There have been times in my work life where it's completely taken over, working extremely long hours, not getting in until the early hours of the morning, and then showering and leaving, very early to go back in. So I think it's very important to have that balance, and to acknowledge that you're only, effective for a portion of the day. And then I guess the third thing I would say is, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. And as cliched as that sounds, I think in investment banking in particular, you really do need to take the rough with the smooth. You don't get to be that senior level in an investment bank without really, really, living by that mantra. So, in short, it would be those 3 things.
Excellent. Yes, thank you so much for that. That's really, really useful. Listen, thank you so much for taking part, and much appreciated. Really, really interesting stuff.